when 3 days before my uncle took office, the outgoing president, President Eisenhower, gave what I think we should today regard as the most important speech in American history, where he warned Americans against the domination, this emerging military-industrial complex that would turn us into an imperium abroad and a national security state at home, and destroy our role as the world's exemplary democracy. And he had been the commander-in-chief in World War II, so his words were very important. And then my uncle, I was on my birthday in 1960, January 17, 61. My uncle takes office 3 days later, and then his 1,000 days in office are just a constant fistfight with the military-industrial complex to keep the country out of war. They kept trying to trick him into war. They did it at the Bay of Pigs 3 months in. They tell him, you got to send these guys over. And he said, I'm not using the military to invade a country. And, I don't like communism. I don't like Castro. But the Cubans have to make their own determination about what kind of government they're going to have. The U.S. can't go into all these other countries and change governments around. And he said, I don't want the U.S. military involved. And I don't think we should be involved in any part of it. And they said, don't worry. We'll use United Fruit Company boats to get the men there. And he said, I'm not giving air cover. I just want you to know that. They said, don't you worry, you won't need it. And he said, why? Castro has 200,000 soldiers in the best intelligence agencies. And why do you think 2,000 men are going to be able to win this battle? And they said, because we have the whole thing wired and rigged. And there's going to be a big uprising in Cuba, and it's all done. This is what Allen Dulles told him. Richard Bissell, Charles Cabello was the military general of the CIA. He suspected that, but he couldn't believe they just lying to him. And when those men were dying on the beach, and they were telling, now you got to send in air cover, you got to send in the Essex, the aircraft carrier. He said, I'm not. And he realized he'd been tricked, and they thought a young president would, cave in to avoid humiliation. It was the lowest point of my uncle's presidency that those men were dying because of his bad decision. And he took the blame publicly, but privately he said, I want to take the CIA and shatter it into 1,000 pieces and scatter it to the winds. And then over the next couple months, he fired Dulles, he fired Cabell, he fired Bissell, and he tried to clean up the agency. And then, they tried to get him to go into Laos. He refused. They called him a traitor for that. They tried to get him to go into Cuba in 61 and again in 62 during the missile crisis, and he wouldn't send it. He wouldn't, go invade. They tried to get him to go in Berlin in 62, and he wouldn't. They tried to get him to go in Vietnam. They said you need 250,000 troops. His closest advisors, people he trusted, like Max Taylor, Averell Harriman, Dean Acheson, they said, if you don't send in 250,000 troops, the Vietnamese government's going to collapse. And he said, it's their government. It can't be our fight. We can help them the way the French helped us during the Revolution, but we cannot fight. This cannot be the American war. And he did send in 16,000 advisors. They were not, under the rules of engagement, allowed to participate in combat. They were mainly Green Berets. And they were fewer people than he sent to the University of Mississippi, to Ole Miss, to get one black man in, right, to college. It was few people. But then he found out in October of 63, he found out a Green Beret had died. And he asked Walt Rosdow for a casualty list. And Walt Rosdow came back and said, there's 75 Americans already died over there. My uncle said, that's too many. We're bringing them all home. And that afternoon, he signed National Security Order 263, ordering all military personnel out of Vietnam, with the first 1,000 coming home in November and the last one coming home the following December. And 30 days to the day after he signed that order, he was murdered. And a week after that, President Johnson remanded the order and then sent 250,000 troops in. Nixon came in after him, sent 560,000. 56,000 never came home of our guys. We killed 1 million of them. 56,000 of ours never came home, including my cousin, George Skakel, who died in the Tet Offensive. And then, my father ran against the war in '68. He wins the California primary, meaning he's on his way to the White House, and he's shot that night. Martin Luther King had become a peace activist 2 months before he was shot. These traumas, my uncle's death, my father, King's death, the Vietnam War itself, 9/11, and COVID, each one of these traumas pushed us a little farther down that road that Eisenhower warned us against, where today, we are the military-industrial complex. Our democracy, nobody in this country believes that their voices are audible in Washington. Everything is rigged, and everybody knows it. It's like the kabuki theater of a democracy. It's not real. It's a Hollywood stage set with, people pretending to have elections that are already chosen in advance and everything else. And I'm not being paranoid, just look what's happening right now. So, I think part of unraveling that and going back to our original idealism and the other view of an American future, and, is America's the exemplary nation and the moral authority around the globe. Means going back and looking at the original trauma and exposing what actually happened to my uncle.